The massive alien ship appeared on a quiet Tuesday morning, silently dropping through Earth's clouds like a silver teardrop. The world's military forces scrambled their jets and readied their weapons, but the vessel made no aggressive moves. Instead, it hovered peacefully above New York City, its smooth surface reflecting the morning sunlight. Inside the United Nations emergency session, world leaders gathered to discuss this unprecedented situation. They hadn't expected their first alien contact to be so dramatic. As they debated their next move, the alien ship broadcasted a simple message in perfect English. Greetings, Earth. We are the Unified Species Coalition. We come in peace. The aliens call themselves the USC, and they looked almost comical to human eyes. Standing at roughly 7 feet tall, they had slim, delicate bodies with 4 arms and large, round eyes that seemed perpetually surprised. Their skin shifted colors like a mood ring, though they quickly explained this was simply their natural way of communicating emotions. Ambassador Firstlight, the lead alien diplomat, stood before the UN Security Council, his skin rippling with gentle blues and greens the humans would later learn meant curiosity and amusement. "We have been watching your species for some time," he said, his voice melodious and soft. "We believe you are ready to join the galactic community." The aliens seemed particularly fascinated by human military forces. When they toured a military base as part of their diplomatic visit, Firstlight and his team couldn't hide their amusement. They giggled. Actually giggled. At the sight of tanks and artillery pieces. "How quaint," Firstlight said to his assistant, their skin flickering with pink patterns of mirth. "They still use projectile weapons, and look at their ceremonial warriors, standing so straight and serious." The ceremonial warriors were actually members of the Marine Corps' Honor Guard, standing at attention during the diplomatic visit. The aliens walked past them, barely giving them a second glance, more interested in the base's cafeteria than its armory. During the base tour, General Roberts tried to explain Earth's military capabilities, but the aliens politely waved him off. "We understand." Firstlight said kindly, his skin showing patronizing swirls of yellow. Many young species maintain ceremonial defense forces as they transition to true civilization. "We had similar traditions thousands of years ago." The aliens shared their technology freely, or at least what they considered basic technology. They offered plans for more efficient solar panels, cleaner engines, and better recycling systems. But they politely declined to share anything related to weapons or defense systems. "You won't need those anymore," Firstlight explained. "The galaxy is a peaceful place under our guidance." What the aliens didn't realize, and what they would soon learn, was that humans weren't peaceful because they lacked the capacity for violence. They were peaceful because they chose to be, despite having a capacity for warfare that would shock their new alien friends. As the first week of alien contact drew to a close, the USC delegation announced their plans to establish a permanent embassy on Earth. They chose a location in upstate New York, away from major population centers. For safety reasons, they explained, though they didn't specify whose safety they were concerned about. The USC requested that Earth provide security personnel for their embassy, but they made it clear they expected this to be largely ceremonial. "Perhaps some of your colorful ceremonial warriors," Firstlight suggested, his skin showing amused patterns. "They do add such a lovely aesthetic touch." Little did Firstlight know that his request for a marine security detail would lead to a dramatic shift in how the USC viewed humanity. The aliens were about to learn that humans weren't the simple, peaceful species they appeared to be, and that sometimes the most dangerous beings in the galaxy are those who choose peace because they know the true cost of war. Staff Sergeant Tom Miller stood perfectly still as the alien embassy's scanner swept over him. His dress blues were immaculate, every ribbon and medal precisely placed. Behind him, through the embassy's glass walls, the morning sun painted the New York countryside in soft golden light. "Another ceremonial warrior," Firstlight said to his assistant, their skin shifting to that now familiar shade of pink amusement, though this one seems more weathered than the others. What the aliens didn't know, what their scanners couldn't detect, was that Miller had spent 12 years in the Marines, including 3 combat tours. The ribbons on his chest weren't ceremonial. Each told a story of battles fought and lives saved. But Miller just stood there, face neutral, letting them think what they wanted. "Welcome, Warrior Miller," First Light said, using the term they decided was appropriately quaint for human soldiers. "We trust you'll find your ceremonial duties here quite peaceful." The alien's skin rippled with gentle patterns that suggested he was trying not to laugh. Miller nodded politely. "Thank you, Ambassador. I look forward to ensuring the security of the embassy." He kept his voice level, professional, though he noticed everything. The embassy's layout, its weak points, the way the alien staff moved through the space. Old habits died hard. The aliens had built their embassy like a giant greenhouse, all sweeping glass curves and delicate crystal spires. Beautiful, but a tactical nightmare. Miller made mental notes about defensive positions and evacuation routes, even as the alien showed him to his ceremonial post, a spot near the main entrance where he would add to the aesthetic appeal of the building. Throughout his first week, Miller watched the aliens go about their business. They floated through their duties on gravity-defying platforms, seemingly unbothered by any security concerns. When Miller suggested setting up emergency protocols, First Light's skin flickered with what humans now recognized as their version of rolling eyes. "Dear Warrior Miller," First Light said, "the galaxy is at peace. The only species who still maintain combat readiness are those who haven't yet reached true civilization. Like those troublesome raiders from the Outer Rim, but they never venture this far into civilized space." Miller had read the briefing about these raiders. They were supposed to be primitive pirates who occasionally harassed outer colony worlds. But something about the way the aliens dismissed them made Miller uneasy. In his experience, underestimating any potential threat was a dangerous mistake. The other Marines assigned to the embassy noticed it too. During their off-duty hours, they quietly prepared. They'd memorized the building's layout, established rally points, and maintained their combat readiness through discreet training sessions that the aliens mistook for ceremonial drill practice. One morning, as Miller stood his post, he overheard 2 alien diplomats discussing Earth's military forces. "Did you see their latest ceremonial display?" one asked, skin showing swirls of amusement. "They called it a military exercise. All those vehicles and weapons, so primitive." "Yes," the other replied, "though I find it somewhat concerning that they maintain these violent traditions. Perhaps we should help them move past this phase more quickly." Miller kept his face carefully blank, but inside, he smiled slightly. Let them think what they wanted. He'd learned long ago that being underestimated could be a tactical advantage. Though he hoped they'd never need to prove the aliens wrong, he and his fellow Marines would be ready if that day came. What the aliens saw as ceremony, Miller knew as discipline. What they dismissed as primitive, he recognized as battle-tested. And what they called violent traditions were actually the hard-learned lessons of countless conflicts, lessons that had taught humanity both the cost of war and the importance of being prepared for it. The attack came during the embassy's first major diplomatic reception. The glass ceiling shattered first, raining crystal shards onto the startled guests below. Through the broken ceiling, 3 sleek black ships descended, their hulls covered in scarred metal and crude weapons. Raiders. First Light's skin turned pale white with terror, but they never come this far into protected space. Miller's response was immediate. "Everyone down," he shouted, already moving toward the nearest group of diplomatic staff. Away from the windows. Security teams to positions. The aliens stared at him in confusion, their skins showing swirls of panic and disbelief. They weren't used to taking orders from their ceremonial guards, but Miller's voice carried the unmistakable authority of combat experience, and even the aliens found themselves responding. The raiders dropped into the embassy on gravity lifts, their armor crude but effective. They were tall, muscular aliens with reptilian features and weapons that looked like they'd been cobbled together from stolen technology. Their leader stepped forward, voice harsh through his translator. "This facility is now under our control," he growled. "Your defenses are pathetic. Surrender, and we might let you live as slaves." First Light moved to step forward, his skin showing diplomatic patterns. "Now surely we can discuss." Miller pulled him back just as a warning shot burned through the space where the ambassador had been standing. The Marine's eyes narrowed as he assessed the situation. 8 raiders, armed with energy weapons. Poor tactical positioning. Overconfident. They hadn't even secured the exits. "Stay down," Miller whispered to First Light. Then he gave hand signals to his Marines positioned around the room. Signals that the raiders, in their arrogance, didn't even notice. What happened next would change the USC's view of humanity forever. Miller's first move was to throw a decorative crystal bowl from a nearby table. It shattered against the raider leader's helmet, surprising him and disrupting his shield for just a moment. In that instant, 2 Marines tackled him from behind, using the alien's own gravity technology against them by disrupting his lift controls. The other raiders turned to fire, but they'd forgotten one of the first rules of combat: never bunch up. A charging Marine bowled through 3 of them like bowling pins, his enhanced strength from Earth's heavier gravity proving devastating. Miller himself was moving too, rolling under a plasma burst and coming up with a stolen raider weapon. He fired with practiced precision, disabling 2 more raiders with shots to their weapon arms. The remaining raiders tried to regroup, but they were already surrounded. First Light watched in stunned horror as his ceremonial guards systematically dismantled what the USC considered one of the most dangerous raid teams in the sector. The Marines moved with a coordination that spoke of years of combat experience, using tactics that seemed brutally efficient to alien eyes. Miller called out positions, directed fire, and coordinated the defense like he'd done it 100 times before, because he had. When one raider tried to use a diplomatic aid as a shield, Miller didn't hesitate. He threw his weapon to distract the raider, closed the distance in 2 steps, and executed a hand-to-hand combat move that left the alien unconscious. The entire fight lasted less than 3 minutes. When it was over, all 8 raiders were disarmed and secured. None were killed, though several would need medical attention. The Marines had contained the threat with minimal casualties and collateral damage, exactly as their training had taught them. First Light stared at Miller, the ambassador's skin showing colors the Marines had never seen before. You are not ceremonial warriors at all, are you?" he asked, his voice shaking. Miller checked the restraints on the last raider before answering. "No, sir," he said simply. "We're Marines." And for the first time, the aliens began to understand that there was nothing ceremonial about Earth's warriors at all. The embassy's meeting room was silent except for the soft hum of the environmental systems. The raiders had been taken away by USC security forces, and now Miller sat across from a panel of alien diplomats. Their skins showed shifting patterns of blue, green, and gray, colors that humans had learned meant confusion, fear, and curiosity. First Light spoke first, his voice unusually serious. "Warrior Miller, or should I say, Staff Sergeant Miller, your actions today were disturbing." Miller sat straight in his chair, his face professional and calm. "Sir, we responded to a direct threat to embassy personnel. Standard protocol for—" "Standard," another diplomat, Deepwater, interrupted. His skin flashed angry red. "You used our own technology against them. You turned decorative objects into weapons. You engaged in physical combat when they were already wounded." Miller's expression didn't change. "We used available resources to neutralize the threat while minimizing casualties. All 8 raiders are alive and will recover fully." "That's not the point." Deepwater's skin was practically glowing now. "Your species claimed to be peaceful. Yet we saw you fight with techniques that suggest extensive combat experience. You didn't even hesitate. With respect, sir, Miller said quietly, being peaceful isn't the same as being helpless. Every Marine in that room has trained extensively to protect civilians while minimizing loss of life, even enemy life. First Light leaned forward, his skin showing patches of thoughtful green. You said standard protocol. Are you suggesting these brutal tactics are normal for your species? For the first time, Miller allowed himself a small smile. Sir, what you saw today was heavily restrained. We operated under strict rules of engagement and used non-lethal tactics whenever possible. The aliens stared at him. Their skin shifted to pale yellow, total disbelief. Restrained. First Light's voice was barely a whisper. You call what we saw restrained. Miller took a deep breath. Ambassador, do you know why humans have rules of engagement? Why we have something called the Geneva Convention? Why we have defined what constitutes a war crime? The aliens shook their heads, their skin patterns showing growing unease. It's not because we're naturally peaceful, Miller continued. It's because we learned, through centuries of warfare, that we needed rules to prevent combat from becoming too horrific. What you saw today wasn't even close to crossing those lines. Deepwater's skin had turned a sickly gray. Are you saying humans have ways of fighting that are worse than this? Miller nodded slowly. What you saw was a small team of Marines using minimal force to subdue armed attackers while protecting civilians. We didn't use lethal force. We didn't employ tactical deception. We didn't even use any of our standard combat equipment. Those raiders got off easy. First Light's skin showed complex patterns the humans had never seen before. You speak of these things so calmly, like you're discussing the weather. Because for us, this is basic training, Miller explained. Every Marine learns these skills. Every Marine knows how to assess threats, protect civilians, and neutralize enemies with appropriate force. It's not ceremony. It's not tradition. It's survival. The room fell silent again. The aliens looked at each other, their skins showing rapid changes of color as they communicated in their own way. Finally, First Light spoke again. We may have misunderstood your species, Sergeant Miller. Perhaps you could explain more about these rules of engagement and war crimes you mentioned. Miller nodded, his expression serious. I think that would be a very good idea, sir, because what you saw today, that was just a small demonstration of why humans choose to be peaceful. Not because we can't fight, but because we know exactly how far that fight could go. The alien skins all turned pale at his words, finally beginning to understand that they had drastically underestimated humanity's capacity for warfare and the wisdom that came from it. The embassy's main conference room had been quickly converted into an impromptu classroom. The alien diplomats sat in a semicircle, their skins showing steady patterns of deep blue, their color for intense concentration. Miller stood before them, his dress uniform replaced by standard utilities. Before I begin, Miller said, activating the room's holographic display, I need to warn you that some of this information might be disturbing. More disturbing than what we witnessed earlier, First Light asked, his skin rippling with concern. Miller's face remained serious. Yes, sir. Much more disturbing. What you saw was a minor security incident. What I'm about to show you is why humans created rules for warfare in the first place. The first image appeared, Earth during World War I. The alien skins paled as Miller explained the scale of the conflict. Millions dead. Entire cities destroyed. Weapons of mass destruction deployed. This was just one war, Miller continued, his voice steady. One of many in our history. We fought with everything from sticks and stones to nuclear weapons. We fought over resources, beliefs, territory, and sometimes simply because we could. Deepwater's skin showed patches of distress. But how did your species survive such violence? By learning from it, Miller answered. Each war taught us something. We learned that unrestricted warfare could destroy everything we fought for. So we made rules. The next images showed the signing of the Geneva Convention. Miller explained each major point: treatment of prisoners, protection of civilians, banned weapons, prohibited tactics. These aren't suggestions, Miller emphasized. These are laws we created because we saw what happened without them. War crimes aren't just legal terms. They're markers of action so horrible that even in warfare, we agree they cross the line. First Light's skin showed a new color, deep purple, indicating dawning comprehension. The raiders, you could have killed them easily, couldn't you? Miller nodded. A single Marine platoon with standard equipment could have eliminated their entire force in seconds. But we didn't, because we've learned to use appropriate force. We've learned to control our capacity for violence. The aliens watched as Miller showed them more: peacekeeping missions, rescue operations, military responses to natural disasters. His explanation painted a picture not just of warfare, but of how military power could be used to protect and save lives. This is why we maintain our military, Miller explained. Not because we want war, but because we understand it better than most. We know exactly how bad things can get, so we stay ready to prevent that from happening. One of the younger diplomats, whose name translated as Morning Song, spoke up. But your weapons, they seem so primitive compared to USC technology. Miller actually smiled at this. Those raiders had energy shields, plasma weapons, and anti-gravity technology. We stopped them with a crystal bowl and hand-to-hand combat. Imagine what we could do with our actual military equipment. The room fell silent as the implications sank in. The alien skins showed waves of color as they processed this information. There's an old human saying, Miller continued softly, "Si vis pacem, para bellum." It means, if you want peace, prepare for war. We're not peaceful because we're weak. We're peaceful because we know exactly how strong we are, and what happens when that strength is misused. First Light stood slowly, his skin showing the formal patterns of official communication. Sergeant Miller, I believe the USC needs to radically revise its assessment of human military capabilities, and perhaps learn from your species' experience. Miller nodded. That's why I'm telling you all this, sir. Because true peace doesn't come from ignoring violence. It comes from understanding it well enough to choose a better way. The alien skins all shifted to that new purple shade of comprehension, finally understanding that humanity's greatest strength wasn't their capacity for violence, but their conscious choice to control it. The USC's research vessel hung in orbit above Earth, its sensors focused on the planet below. Inside, a team of alien scientists and military analysts worked frantically, their skins showing rapid changes between research purple and alarm red as they processed new information about humanity. First Light stood at the observation window, watching Earth rotate slowly beneath them. Behind him, screens displayed historical footage that the humans had provided. Battles, peacekeeping missions, military exercises, and humanitarian operations. Impossible, muttered Deepwater, reviewing another report. His skin flickered between disbelief and fear. Their entire history is filled with warfare. Not just recent history, all of it. They've been fighting and improving their combat techniques for thousands of years. A military analyst, sharp eye, pulled up a holographic display of human combat formations. Look at this. Their basic military unit, the fire team, hasn't changed significantly in centuries. Not because they couldn't improve it, but because they perfected it through actual combat experience. First Light turned from the window. How many wars have they fought? The research team's lead scientist, whose name translated as Truth Seeker, consulted her data. Her skin showed patches of academic fascination mixed with horror. We've counted over 15,000 significant conflicts in their recorded history. And that's just the ones they wrote down. 15,000. First Light's skin paled. The entire USC has only experienced 43 military conflicts in our history. Sharp Eye enlarged a display showing human martial arts. It's not just organized warfare. They've developed hundreds of different fighting styles. Some of them are thousands of years old, refined through generations of practice. They turn their bodies into weapons. And yet, Truth Seeker added, her skin showing thoughtful blue patterns. They choose peace. They could have conquered their planet many times over. Any of their major powers could have dominated the others. But instead, they learned to cooperate. Deepwater pulled up footage from the Raider incident. Look at their response here. Every move is practiced, efficient. Those Marines didn't improvise these tactics. They drilled them countless times. Even their so-called ceremonial guards are combat veterans. First Light watched the footage again, seeing it with new eyes. What they had dismissed as primitive now looked frighteningly effective. The Marines hadn't just fought the Raiders, they had controlled the entire situation from start to finish. We've made a serious mistake, First Light said quietly. His skin showed the formal patterns of an official declaration. We thought their peaceful nature came from weakness. We were wrong. They're peaceful because they understand war better than any species we've ever encountered. Truth Seeker added another data point to her growing analysis. Their military technology may seem primitive, but their tactics and training are far beyond anything in our database. They've spent more time fighting and studying warfare than most USC species have existed. And these war crimes they mentioned, Sharp Eye added, his skin showing disturbed yellow patterns. They didn't create these rules because they were too peaceful. They created them because they knew exactly how terrible war could become. First Light turned back to the window, watching Earth's clouds swirl below. We need to completely revise our approach to human relations. They're not a young, peaceful species needing our guidance. They're veterans of combat on a scale we can barely comprehend. What should we tell the Council? Deepwater asked, his skin showing worried green swirls. The truth, First Light replied, that we discovered a species that mastered warfare so completely that they chose peace instead. A species that doesn't avoid violence because they're incapable of it, but because they know its cost better than anyone. Around the room, the alien skins all shifted to deep purple, the color of profound realization. They had come to teach humanity about peace, only to discover that humanity had learned that lesson long ago, through thousands of battles and millions of sacrifices. And for the first time, the USC began to wonder if perhaps they were the ones who had something to learn. The USC Grand Council chamber was packed with representatives from 100 alien worlds. The massive circular room hummed with nervous energy as First Light prepared to deliver his report. His skin showed formal patterns of blue and gold, marking the seriousness of the occasion. In the observation gallery, Staff Sergeant Miller sat quietly in his dress blues. This was the first time a human had been invited to attend a Grand Council session. Next to him, several other alien diplomats kept their distance, their skins showing uncertain patterns of gray and yellow. First Light stepped onto the speaking platform, which rose gently into the air so all could see him. The chamber fell silent. Honored Council, he began, his voice carrying clearly through the translator system. I come before you to correct a grave error in our assessment of Earth and its people. The holographic displays activated, showing scenes from Earth's military history, peaceful achievements, and the recent Raider incident at the embassy. First Light's skin shifted to academic purple as he continued. We believed we had found a young, peaceful species in need of our guidance. We were wrong. The humans aren't peaceful because they lack the capacity for warfare. They're peaceful because they've mastered warfare so completely that they understand its true cost. Murmurs spread through the chamber. Many representatives showed skin patterns of disbelief or concern. The recent Raider attack on our embassy proved this. First Light continued. A small group of human Marines, using minimal force and what we considered primitive techniques, defeated a Raider team that has terrorized our outer colonies for years. And they did this while protecting civilians and avoiding lethal force. The displays showed footage from the embassy incident. The council members watched in silence as the Marines efficiently neutralized the raiders. Several representatives' skins turned pale with shock. "But this is not why we should reconsider our approach to humanity," First Light said. "What's most remarkable is not their capability for violence, but their conscious choice to restrict it. They created laws for warfare, not because they were too peaceful, but because they knew exactly how horrible war could become." Miller watched as the alien representatives processed this information. Their skin patterns shifted through various colors as they struggled to understand this new perspective. "The humans have a saying," First Light continued. "The most dangerous person in the room is not the one who wants to fight, but the one who knows how to fight and chooses not to." Earth's history contains more combat experience than our entire civilization. They've fought more battles, developed more tactics, and learned more lessons about warfare than all our species combined. He paused, letting that sink in. Then his skin showed the formal patterns of an official recommendation. "I propose that we revise our diplomatic stance toward Earth immediately. We should not treat them as a young species to be guided, but as veterans of conflicts we can barely imagine. They have much to teach us about both war and peace." The chamber erupted in discussion, skin colors flickering rapidly as the representatives debated. Finally, the head counselor raised her hands for silence. Her skin showed the deepest purple Miller had ever seen. "First Light's recommendation is accepted," she announced. "Earth will be reclassified as an advanced military culture with demonstrated peaceful intent. Furthermore, we request human assistance in training our peacekeeping forces and updating our defensive protocols." After the session, First Light found Miller in the observation gallery. The alien skin showed respectful gold patterns. "Your species has surprised us, Sergeant Miller," he said. "We came to teach you about peace, only to discover you had learned that lesson through the hardest possible path." Miller smiled slightly. "Sometimes the strongest peace comes from knowing exactly what the alternative costs." First Light's skin showed understanding purple. "Indeed, and perhaps that is the most important lesson humanity has to teach the galaxy, that true peace doesn't come from avoiding violence, but from understanding it well enough to choose a better way." As they looked out over the council chamber, both human and alien knew that this was just the beginning. The galaxy was about to learn some very important lessons from the species they had once dismissed as ceremonial warriors, lessons written in humanity's blood and hard-won wisdom about the true meaning of peace.